So I would now like to pass you over to Santiago, the technical manager at Discover Financial, who's going to run you through his journey.
So yeah, hello, my name is Santiago. Yeah, so I work at Discover Financial Services as a senior manager for DevOps. So today I'm going to walk you through about a strategy and the way we've implemented DevOps within Discover, and more specifically within the settlement group. So just a quick introduction about Discover. So Discover is a bank with a direct banking offering. You can get your Discover card in the US. You can get a student, personal, or home loan, or you can open your own deposit. And it's also a payment services company that operates 3 different payment networks, like Pulse, Diners Club International, and Discover Global Network. So now I want to introduce you to the project. In the payment services organization, we're undergoing a digital transformation process. We are building the new enterprise payment platform, EPP. And as part of that, we're building the new settlement system. So this new settlement system has all the capabilities the current system has, controls the money coming in and out of the payment network. It decides how much to pay our acquirers network and how much to charge our issuers, safely handles the billions of dollars that run through our platform every year. So we're also introducing new business capabilities, support multiple currencies, further enhance our global partnerships, be able to apply flexible fees, faster payment capabilities, support the 3 networks mentioned earlier, and also new technological requirements. So the system has to be able to scale in and out. In our business case, we have normal days and peak days during the year, like Black Friday or Cyber Monday, where the number of transactions we need to process increases significantly. We also want faster software releases, as we want to be able to deliver business value to our customers faster, run on cutting-edge technologies, move away from mainframe. So what challenges were we facing, and what's this ground-up approach that I was referring to in the title? So the ground-up approach is really about implementing solutions that work for your teams, developers, testers, SRE engineers, production support, and then evolving these solutions by adding more features on top of the existing ones. But your starting point is you already have something that works. And I believe it's easy to see why this strategy makes sense when you have so many fronts to deal with, fronts that sure ring a bell. So siloed teams, teams doing their own thing, as this happens vertically from dev to prod, horizontally across teams that operate at the same environment. Rapid growth. So to pull off something like the settlement platform, where there's lots of new business capabilities that need to be implemented, you have to ramp up your headcount. We grew from 20 to over 100 developers in a short period of time. That in itself it's not bad, it's great news actually. But it does introduce challenges. If your teams are siloed, adding more teams does not help. Lack of standards and consistency goes hand in hand with siloed teams running their own ad hoc jobs, their own way with no consistency in the delivery process because there aren't guidelines to follow. And it contributes to certain resources, like DevOps queue engineers becoming a bottleneck due to manual tasks or poor organization. So I'm referring to, for example, DevOps engineer being in reactive mode. Teams just pulls them to the desk to implement a quick fix for them. Also, manual tasks and handovers create bottlenecks in the different environments, releases delay, and challenges with new technologies. Moving to the cloud brings a lot of benefits. Before being in the cloud, we suffered from lack of environments. Some teams couldn't promote to higher environments because they weren't ready. As an example, it took us 6 months to get our first on-prem Hadoop cluster. Once in the cloud, that same process takes about 15 minutes, and we can spin up hundreds of them. But it also comes with challenges. Now our architecture becomes hybrid, so running workloads on premise and in the cloud. Security is priority number 1, and being amongst the first group moving into the cloud in Discover, it meant that there were quite a few patterns that needed to be worked out, securing access, securing file transfer, securing storage and data management. Also, being a financial institution means that we operate in a regulated environment. That impacts the way you design and deliver your solutions. And there are a number of teams or groups whose responsibility is to set the standards required to be able to deploy workloads into production. And for that, evidence needs to be gathered to ensure that you meet those standards. So moving into the cloud increased the number of external teams we needed to interface with. And some of those teams had also been recently created. So you need to factor in changes in requirements as those teams evolve. So hopefully this draws a picture of all the different elements we had to consider. But we have a goal. So our goal is to constantly improve our software delivery lifecycle by being able to release software faster, more reliably, more securely. So we want to implement solutions are effective, ensuring that the work we put in allows us to move forward in our continuous integration, test automation, deployment strategy, reliability, security. Key here is that it has to be done incrementally, constant evolution. That gives you time to analyze what works, gather feedback. Discarding options is also part of the journey. We want standardization and consistency. Best practices, patterns need to get standardized. So make sure there's time and effort allocated for these types of endeavors. This is good for not reinventing the wheel every time, allows for better visibility, knowledge transfer, better maintainability. And once everyone starts speaking a common language, it eases frictions between groups and gradually removes boundaries and handovers. We also want to empower teams to come up with solutions that work for them. No one knows better than the teams what they need to be effective, the manual tasks they want to get rid of, ultimately seeking to have the DevOps practices embedded in the teams. So we decided to embrace the following principles, which we see as a win-win strategy. So visibility and transparency. So make sure there's good information flow so everybody can benefit. Communication is key. So information needs to be available to all teams. And referring to workshops or lunch and learns to promote solutions, but also to visual displays such as dashboards or internal websites where you can monitor quality and work in progress. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listen to the feedback. No one knows better than teams what they need to be effective. Run frequent maturity assessment, capability surveys, open up communication channels with the teams. Once you understand the requirements, you can provide a solution. Conscious effort to improve. So for all the teams, it's not about working harder, but working smarter. Part of the job is to focus on improvement. And if work comes out of that, that work needs to be planned properly with the right visibility. We succeed together. DevOps engineers succeed when teams succeed, when releasing software to production becomes BAU. And now I'm going to walk you through some examples of internal solutions or efforts that have contributed to the improvement of our software delivery lifecycle within settlements. And these solutions sort of came to be by following the above principles. So let's start with the beginning. So up until the migration to the cloud, we didn't have dedicated DevOps resources in settlements. So as they joined, they started with the sheer enablement work needed to build the foundations upon which the teams can build, test, and deploy their processes on. All this work required a great deal of collaboration, both with external teams from the enterprise and teams within settlement to focus on the things that are important to get the ball rolling. So from a DevOps strategy standpoint, we started with the man-in-the-middle pattern, which is a separate DevOps team that acts as a single point of contact between internal settlement teams and external teams. So this is actually an anti-pattern and has its limitations. So in terms of scalability, but it also reduces coordination overhead. And it really worked for us as we took ownership of all the groundwork required and teams knew exactly who to go to discuss issues or opportunities. The areas the team focused on mainly were around the environment setup with an emphasis on security for the environments that we needed to operate in. The automation of the deployment of the infrastructure and services onto those environments, and the implementation of a support model for the settlement teams. So next comes the common pipeline component, we call it CPC. This is a great example of a productive collaboration between the different groups, and it was a big stride towards standardization. It's a feature-rich Jenkins Groovy shared library. This initiative started outside of settlements. It's a framework that is coming from the Payment Organization's DevOps Center of Excellence, currently onboarded by over 80 teams across payments. One of its great strengths is that it's a community project. It's inner sourced. That's why it has been developed so rapidly. And more features and capabilities are being added. Features and capabilities that the teams feed into the backlog. The common pipeline is a framework designed to automate many of the required steps of a CI/CD pipeline. It in itself relies on the groundwork done by the teams to be able to perform some tasks. So let's go through some of the features that it delivers in regards of the CI/CD automation. It supports Git flow and trunk-based pipelines, automatic artifact versioning and tagging, automates the builds, quality checks, deployments, and testing, supports fast and easy rollbacks, introduces approval gates, supports isolated feature branches for parallel development, generates notifications and automated release notes. But the key is that it introduces a way of working and to transition through the environment. It standardizes the CI/CD process. So during the build phase, it will compile, build the source code, execute unit tests, perform code quality checks, scans dependencies, uploads artifacts to Nexus, pushes tags to GitHub, publish release notes on release builds. And during the deployment and test phases, you can approve release through Jenkins UI, you can run pre-deployment smoke tests, you can deploy it to different types of platforms, you can run post-deployment tests, execute your acceptance, integration, or performance tests after deployment, publish reports, and upload tests to Nexus, for example. This framework helps support and enforces development best practices, quality and security controls, and it's feature-rich because it embraces multiple tooling integrations, as you can see in the bottom. These have been introduced gradually as teams needed more capabilities. And as I will show you in the next slides, there are also some custom-made frameworks that we've integrated with CPC because they improved our delivery process, giving you an idea that we're gradually building a comprehensive framework that actually meets our needs, yet still standard. And just to end, CPC initiative has really helped to drive qualities. It's helped massively reduce errors by having a pipeline that fits the software delivery lifecycle. It enforces quality, standardizes large parts of the process. And also because it automates parts of this lifecycle, has reduced the number of manual steps quite significantly for the teams that have onboarded the framework. Another example is the Vulkan Framework, created by a Scrum team in settlements. So some issues were identified in regards of the testing strategy for one of the components in the solution. Pretty complex one. So this new testing framework is meant to address the issues that the team was struggling with. So, I mean, the way the tests were written made it hard to identify in detail what went into every single test scenario, especially when the input data is scattered across different input sources. And the more effort that was added to the ability to have that level of clarity and traceability, the more the test became unreadable. The testing was becoming slower and slower, and more test scenarios were introduced. It was hard to debug problems pertaining to a specific scenario, and especially after introducing parallelism, it became really difficult. File specs kept changing. This led to fields being shifted around all the time, which resulted in the teams having to touch every single file in the suite to account for the new version bump, wasting a lot of time and clogging up the release process. So the team built Vulkan. Vulkan is, in a nutshell, is a new scalable test suite that is able to support high throughput whilst also keeping scenarios readable and easy to maintain. And it's brought great benefits. Recent tests show that the team has been able to achieve test times of under 10 minutes with around 400 scenarios, with the previous solution achieving such times was near impossible, as it would take over 1 hour. As the tests are more readable, the quality has increased, and thus the defects have done the opposite. So the great thing is that it shows that teams take action to improve their frameworks and that it builds on top of the common pipeline. So now this custom-made testing framework is part of the software delivery lifecycle for this particular component. It's part of the pipeline. Its execution is automated. So this means that we have a standard way of releasing software that we can tweak to meet our specific needs. So another framework is which is currently being onboarded in settlements is Bill of Sale. We call it Bill of Sale. It's a multiple component continuous delivery framework. It helps assemble all the components you're interested in deploying together, including the underlying infrastructure, the business components, the test packages, and helps deploy and test all of them in one go automatically. It's a framework that builds on top of the common pipeline. One of its main benefits is that it saves time. So Bill of Sale will cut down time in system integration testing and benchmark testing by a lot. So if you have a release that consists of tens of hundreds of components, for each component you would have to, before run the necessary jobs to have the infrastructure provision, deploy each of the applications individually, and then run the regression jobs. So you can see that there are so many steps, so many clicks, which take a lot of time. So this framework will take care of all those steps. It will help you orchestrate the whole process, one click, one pipeline. And it's configurable. You can decide which steps to execute. You can decide to provision infrastructure, but not decommission or not provision any infrastructure at all. That way it works for every environment as we want it to be end-to-end. It is config-driven, YAML file-based. you need to define the infrastructure you're interested in, the applications you want to deploy, the test packages you want to execute. And because it's built on top of existing capabilities, it supports different platform deployments. And the moral here is that it was relatively fast to design and implement thanks to being able to reuse working capabilities that already existed in the common pipeline, like the capability to deploy on premise, the capability to deploy in the cloud, or the testing framework that it supports. Another example is the metrics and release tracker, MRT. It was started as a side project to shed some light into where releases and features were for the environment, since it's one of the questions release managers are always being asked. And it's evolved from there. It's useful because if you have this information manually gathered and entered into a spreadsheet or similar, it becomes quickly outdated. So it's a process you have to do over and over again. So MRT gathers information from already existing frameworks, one of them being the common pipeline, which emits information when a deployment occurs. So it uses the common pipeline to deliver further value. So this service provides a central place to look at deployment information independent of the platform deployed. So allows non-technical colleagues to view the information in a simpler format, intuitive way, and also includes expert functionality to dump a snapshot of all the environments to an Excel file for further analysis. So to wrap up, so the lessons learned so far from this journey is that when facing overwhelming challenges, it's good to divide and conquer and build little by little, but keep an eye on standardization. As a developer, I feel frustrated. Sorry, it's not what, yeah. When I'm not heard. So make sure you seek to understand first. Lead the way, be proactive, and collectively find solutions that work for your teams. And visibility and transparency fosters innovation. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you found it useful. So this is the end.
Thank you, Santiago. Really insightful, especially to hear from the ground up and how the company adapted to develop their DevOps strategy. Brilliant, thank you. The next question, I believe, was to Santiago, but again, open forum, feel free to jump in as well, guys. What would you suggest in the first steps to upskilling your team when you're trying to implement a DevOps culture?
I think the best way is to find the SMEs in the company that might be experts in certain areas. It could be on the automation side, it can be on SRE side, it could be a combination of those, and organize workshops, lunch and learns, where your team members can actually understand the current practices that are being done in the company, because most probably they will be explaining solutions that will be super relevant to you guys. And also we do have innovation days. That's also another option where you can present your own ideas and you can see other people presenting their ideas on, just POC work, just something quick that, provides a capability and, that can actually then be transferred to an actual project, something that might be useful to the team. So those things, lunch and learns, workshops, that from people within the company, if you have SMEs, that would be the most useful. Okay,
fantastic. And just as you mentioned, obviously we've worked together for some time now, Santiago, but the growth within Discover, I think you mentioned sort of up to 80 people. I would imagine culture has been crucial to the success of that DevOps journey, getting the right culture.
I mean, it has. So we needed to do a lot of investment in. So to me, in order to build up the culture, you have to look at, collaboration. How do you collaborate better? Communication, is the information being shared, and automation. I think that those would be the three pillars that put into practice can actually give you or enable you to put a software delivery process that is fast, reliable, and secure. And we've made some changes in the org within settlements to create the one team mentality, to make the teams as autonomous as possible, to kind of bridge the gap physically, just by people being in the same team, from all the persons required to put a a business feature into production, and that includes leadership. It's not just I'm talking about developers, testers, and SREs. I'm talking about delivery managers, release managers, product owners, and program managers. Anyone that participates on the decision making or the work into putting things into production are part of the same team. So we created the IDTs, which is initiative delivery teams, which are autonomous teams that can put things into production. That's how we improve collaboration. Then obviously a lot of sessions and workshops, again, to share information, all types of information. So not just metrics, is patterns, you know, how things are going, the metrics that we've discussed, the kind of typical DevOps metrics. And then a lot of automation, anything that can be automated. You know, for example, in the pipeline, if the pipeline can deliver consistency, compliance, and security and quality as a service, then that's better than not having it. So that the actual people can focus on the work, and the pipeline, you know, just implements the life cycle for you. So it takes a lot of the manual steps out of your way. That's kind of the things that we working
on. Right, we now have a question for the three of you. So common thread between all seems to be culture and community. What does that actually mean to you? What does it look like? And 3 things you do to create it. That's a question from Susan.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to kind of reiterate on what I said earlier, that to me, collaboration, communication, and automation and involving all the stakeholders that partake in or have a decision in the software delivery lifecycle. Kind of that's the key. But so it's easy to say and quite hard to implement. So just be honest. I mean, there's resistance to change. Sometimes you find teams where they're very they have an expertise or have already some inertia on the way they work, and they kind of muscle through their releases. They're accustomed to that, and you might present certain capabilities and they just don't buy into it, or they buy it, you know, 50%. And how do you deal with that scenario? And I mean, there's no other way than sharing information, sharing the goodness of your approach, making sure that you listen to the reasons why they might not be wanting to make the jump to a different way of working that delivers exactly the same outputs, but with less effort. You know, working smarter versus working harder. And there's no way around that discussion. I mean, you have to have it. You have to have evidence. You have to make them understand that this is and understand why, what's their point of view, what's the bottom line, what's causing the lack of trust, or is it a risk issue that they think they need to do it hands-on manually because they feel more comfortable, or they don't trust your product or solution, or so. I mean, there's no other way around it. That just talk.
Yeah, of course. Brilliant. Yeah, great question, Susan. Thank you. It seems like the common theme, doesn't it? Communication and visibility and the want to implement and have that change. Close that one off. So 2 questions left. This one, again, out to the group from Anonymous. When you come in and take on a new company, team, or project, what do you look at first to really get what's going on with their DevOps? What are your go-to things you put in place to make the biggest impact?
I can go first.
Please do. Yeah.
To me, I normally so you have to talk to the main stakeholders or the leadership of that value stream, the people that partake in the process. You can talk to the senior developers, tech leads, platform leads, delivery managers, product owners, and I normally go through some sort of assessment on. I'm not talking about tooling at this point. I'm not talking about technical solutions in terms of, again, so how the tooling is connected is about the capabilities. So are you able to deploy into production on demand? So some sort of capabilities around the delivery process, capabilities around the actual architecture of the working on, how loosely coupled or intertwined it is, because that gives you an understanding on how they run things. So yeah, thank you. Influence of that team into the solutions. Have they participated in the decision solutions they've put in place? But yeah, also around the process, whether they're working small batches or how they collaborate internally in the team, capabilities around the monitoring. Do they have monitoring? Do they share it? Stuff like that.
But yeah, very, very relevant. I think a good understanding of the business, the culture, what's already in place to then work with.